Hello, I'm Hez Stalkup, and I'm here with Jane Foley, and this is Jane's studio.
Welcome.
Welcome. Welcome on behalf of Jane. So Jane, I am interested in talking to you about your work. We've known each other for a hot minute and have done a few things together. Mm-hmm. I have a lot of...
Actually, a short hot minute.
Oh, really?
We started working together about a year ago, but it's been a lot since then.
But it felt like it's felt so long.
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm sure.
But on the astral plane, we were working together at least a year and a half ago.
It's been almost a year since our first performance at Watermelon Snow.
Was that our first performance together? Mm-hmm. I really thought we did something before that.
I don't know.
Okay. But and then we worked with Aaron Pavlovic and on Unsound, and we're always just in process working together on ideas and life.
Yeah. This month we are curating a series of posts for Florimancy under the theme Shitty Poetic Aesthetic.
Yeah.
And these will be photos, interviews with other artists, documentation of projects in progress.
Yes, which I'm very excited about. So let me talk to you about the relationship between, you do some very different things in your work, but I feel like they're very much in dialogue with each other. I know most of your sculptural work, particularly as of late, the Sad Palm Tree series, which I love so much, but also you do a lot of audio work. And I think that those would seem to be very disparate mediums, but can you talk a little bit about what draws you to each of those, and how are you interested in, I believe you're working on some audio stuff right now, or we were just talking about it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this spring I was working with some objects that are typically kind of a stand-in for a certain feeling of paradise. So these inflatable palm trees that are very throwaway, disposable, cliche fun objects that I just love the life of the object itself. When you open the package and it's deflated and it's floppy, and then you blow it up, and then it seems to have this other life where it needs to be in a pool. You know, a blow-up palm tree just sitting in a parking lot next to a car automatically feels really sad, whereas you take the same object and you put it where it's supposed to go, and then it's, you know, cute or normal or whatever. So this line right between like something being really great and something being really a downer.
Yes.
I feel like is where I've been going with some sculptures. I have taken some of the inflatables and cast concrete inside of them and turned them into lamps in this series that I call Sad Lamps. This name Sad Lamps actually came from these lamps that are for seasonal affective disorder, which is called sad.
Yes.
So I think it's funny, like the sad lamp treatment. I'm not trying to make fun of seasonal affective disorder for sure, but just this idea that this like concrete object that would sink in a pool. I don't know. There's just this dichotomy between. It reminds me of like a family vacation, how it's supposed to be amazing, but really it's like, you know, your dad flipping off somebody while you're pulling out of McDonald's or whatever. Like whatever actually happens on the vacation is more close to the truth. So taking these objects that seem to have a double life in paradise, but also in disappointment, and just, I don't know, just exploring some dark comedy through sculpture right now.
One of my favorite things is watching that process, like the chances that I've had when I come to your studio and you're like, oh, by the way, like we'll be meeting about anything. And you're just like casting as, you know, like an inflatable, or you're just filling it with cement and you're like, can you unzip this palm tree while I record it? Is it still up on Instagram? There's footage that is like a I like to think of it as a depantsing
Yeah.
of this of the vinyl of this palm tree, and it's my hands. They're in like half gloves. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'm
I'm
very
not going to call it a
optimistic
collaboration,
about
but
it is a collaboration.
I'm just saying, you know, it takes a lot to get that speed and pace and
Yeah, I'm very optimistic
feeling.
about windows of time. So I feel like I'll be working with some really dirty materials right before I'm supposed to have a meeting about something completely unrelated. And then somebody shows up for the meeting and I'm like, oh wait, no, can you hold this bag of concrete, or can you? So I was unpeeling this palm tree, but it was upside down. And so the unpeeling of the plastic was very comedic and very phallic and just like gross in this way, because the palm tree is so cute and bright, and then the concrete underneath is just like, what is going on? So then I wanted to film it, but I couldn't with my hands and stuff. So I was going to wait for Hez to show up for this meeting, and Hez happens to show up in a cool jacket and these fingerless gloves to unpeel the palm. So this little, I don't know, little temporary video just of a process documentation kind of grew a life of its own and was like a little tiny performance unsheathing of a palm.
Well, it's helped me appreciate your work so much in the sense of, like, I've always liked your finished work, which is, before we spent more time around each other, was what I was seeing. But seeing seeing us meet, and you're like, oh yeah, I just cast these inflatables, and I'm stripping away everything that is like fun and colorful about them. Like, seeing your process really helps me see how much it shows up in your final work, which I really enjoy.
Yeah, I'm always trying to figure out the balance between, I love craftsmanship. I love things being really well made and really finished, but I also don't like it when sculpture is so finished that it doesn't have any sort of honesty or strangeness about it. So I'm always trying to pull myself back from the complete finish of the sculpture and see what I can keep showing about the process. So recently I've been, because I also work as a set builder, so we're taught to hide things and like make everything really smooth and believable and realistic. And therefore with sculpture, I really like playing with just leaving a bare cord out, even though I know exactly how I could hide it in a sheath and like put it in the wall and then you'll never see it. But instead of just doing that, I've been asking myself, you know, what do I want to see that's unfinished, or, you know, so.
Well, and I think both you and I are like, have a lot of interest in depictions of failure.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that, and I've always responded to identifying those things that would seem to be poor aesthetic choices, you know, by certain standards, as being something really revelatory and meaningful.
Yeah.
When you know it's intentional, you know you didn't just overlook the cord.
Yeah. I think our Watermelon Snow performance is a really good example of that. So Hez does dance and choreography, and I really liked Hez's work, and so I invited Hez to collaborate with me on this performance that I knew wasn't really going to be documented in a way, and it was not in a very serious venue. It was a spontaneous sort of adult talent show. I don't know if adult is the word, because not like
that sounds more erotic
adulty
than it is.
But yeah, a grown person's talent show that Hez and I tried to give ourselves just one day to create a dance performance.
It was like a few hours.
Yeah, it was a few hours. And the funny thing is, we were trying to make this thing super shitty, super unfinished, but both of us tend to be like so kind of hardworking and perfectionist on the other end of that we just worked so hard with our choreography.
For the shortest
little piece ever.
Yeah.
So we showed up to the performance just completely drenched in sweat, like serious face. We had these characters that we made up. We were from rural Germany, and therefore like we didn't speak very much English and basically didn't say anything.
Oh, I think we did. I think we were just like denying everyone. Like,
everyone, yeah.
No.
So kind of stayed in character the whole night, even went as far as to not really talk to a lot of the people who were at the performance and who were our friends.
Maybe it's just convenient for all my social phobias.
Yeah, it was definitely exploring this hanging on to control and letting go of control. Like, where do you bring the thing all the way to finish? Where is it worth it to do that? And where do you just kind of let some spontaneous things come in?
Right. I think a lot of what you and I do and talk about is how to make a container for improvisation, because I feel like a lot of what makes your work really alive and really engaging and very like human and relatable is that you're making decisions as you go. Like, it's not super planned, or at least that's my take on thinking about, like, you don't know the outcome of like pouring cement inside an inflatable object, and that's part of what is going to show up in the way that it looks when it's done.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit, because I know you're working on an audio project, and we were just talking about it earlier, that was audio that you recorded on your most recent residency.
Yeah, so for the month of May, I was in a residency in Linz, Austria. The residency is called Salzamt, and it is funded through the state of Upper Austria. Was just an apartment and a studio situation, so no framework for the month, just time to discover and make work. So most days when I was just going about my usual business or exploring the city, I would bring my sound recorder with me, because I was just looking for sounds that have to do with place or sounds that don't have to do with place. You know, some sounds were kind of musical that I recorded, and they're just a source artifact that I will maybe use in a composition later. But probably the most important sound to me right now is one complete sound that in the city of Linz itself would be extremely familiar and extremely symbolic, but to me sounded completely wild and unfamiliar, which was one time of day in the main church square, they just toll all of the bells. They just told them and told them and told them. So it isn't playing a melody like how you would think, or how I'm used to church bells doing. They were just all tolling, and it sounded very warbly, very resonant. And as the bells were tolling, you heard them bouncing off the surfaces of the buildings. And so I was listening to this, but then I started to walk further and further away and down a street that faces out of the church. The sounds were just bouncing off of the walls and becoming complete chaos, just sort of refining into this drony noise. So I recorded that sound and I played it back to myself, and I was kind of tiptoeing around it, like, what should it be? Because it was already so complex and had such a feel that I started coming up with some video images regarding this sound that ended up being a 2-channel video piece with the sound playing as well. The source material that I used for the videos was these, it's so different than the sound, but to me it looks how it sounds. So it's instructional videos for how to do a certain swimming stroke. I used to be a synchronized swimmer, and there's a stroke called egg beater that water polo swimmers also use. And in the instructional videos, you just see like chest down and a pool of blue. And the legs, they just spin like this to propel a body upward. So it's to keep your chest more out of the water. But everyone's legs move at an individual pace and fluctuate also over time. So it makes a rhythm, but it also gets off of the rhythm and then comes back to the rhythm. And especially if there's 2 different people involved, you get this constant churning. So I basically just made a 2-channel video that looked how the sound sounded. But I feel like it had this like celebratory, exciting thing, like a blue pool, you know, but then also the stroke itself is kind of ugly. Like as you see these people staying afloat, I also think you think of them drowning.
Yes.
Not that they're about to, they look plenty strong, but it's such a struggle, you know.
Well, I love that I have not seen the particular footage that you've drawn from, but I have seen what you're describing with synchronized swimmers, and it's always so meaningful to me that it's such a fight under the surface, and it's asymmetrical, even to create this beautiful symmetry and this sense of no effort. That it's such a battle under the surface. It looks like, you know, like a movie where people are about to be attacked by sharks or something, or like, you know, like the Jaws lead up.
Yeah, and it's the ultra feminine, just like ultra feminine. And I feel like even though the video that I eventually made is male swimmers with a Speedo, I feel like, I don't know, there's something about the movement and the aesthetic of the swimming stroke under the water that even still feels feminine on male bodies to me, just because it's like, I don't know what it is. It's this dance-like, but also grotesque kind of.
Yeah,
I don't know.
It's brutal. It's brutal. It's that you do what you have to do to get it done.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about how audio plays a role in you thinking about gallery spaces and you thinking about how to present things?
Yeah.
And I think you were mentioning this to me before, that how to make use of spaces that are unconventional as gallery spaces, and using sound and recordings of sound as a way to do that.
Yeah, I think that I'm definitely fascinated with making a space within a space. I think that when I see a gallery as a space to play sound, I don't usually want to play it on headphones, because then when you're in a gallery, you are watching somebody listening. So when you're wearing headphones, you have this feeling that somebody's waiting for the headphones, or somebody sees you listening, and therefore you might be sort of, without even meaning to, performative about how you're behaving or something like that. So I'm really interested in creating these smaller acoustic spaces, like a little dome or a structure that you can crawl into or something like that, to kind of have within a gallery a space that is designated for the sound. So you step into a threshold and there it is. I've even felt that way about my studio itself. I always have something in here that's like a smaller space that I use to test out sounds inside of. So I did have this sort of A-frame tent with landscaping cloth to drown out the light, sort of a sensory deprivation space that I liked to play sound in. And I even had this feeling when I went in there that it was cooler than everything else. And I don't know if that has to do with my air conditioning or if that was completely my imagination, but definitely I like breaking larger spaces down to something smaller, but also creating a space for social listening. So instead of isolating one person and listening on headphones, a way that we often do in galleries, I would rather it be a space that can fit 4 to 8 people or something like that, and then everyone listens together and you're not trying to be somewhere else.
I liked that when you did, I believe you did that at Met Gallery in their old space.
Yeah.
And you built a small structure, and it was right after your residency in Iceland. And it was interviews of people talking about their homes, or their first homes, and also the sound of like traversing the landscape of Iceland. And it really was it would have been totally different had I been listening to that alone.
Yeah.
Even surrounded by people, knowing that I'm the only one hearing the audio would have produced something entirely different than choosing to share space with people, or knowing that I was in a space that other people would be sharing this experience with. It was a different kind of attention.
Yeah, I haven't studied architecture formally, but it is a great love of mine, and I feel like it's something I'm always grappling with. How spaces make you feel, what makes something home-like, what is domestic versus public spaces. And also, I make a lot of my best work, I think, while I'm on residencies away from home. And so I think that I'm always, I don't know, looking for placehood, identity, regarding built structures, trying to either build some structures that feel a certain way or respond to the feel of what's already there. So I think that's part of what fascinates me by just using sound as a way to explore a city or different spaces, either by playing it in a space or traversing spaces to record. So a lot of times when I'm recording, I won't even use my source material for anything. Like I'll just delete it and record over it again if I don't think I got anything, you know. So, but it's kind of a way of deep listening as I'm taking walks. So I don't know. I mean, to me, it ties perfectly to this idea of like finding home, or what is feeling at home.
Yeah.
Whether or not it involves an actual structure or not.
Yeah. No, I love the idea of different ways of creating structure. I mean, I think even like riding around on public transportation or walking around in the city, so often having a sound barrier and the sense of like wearing headphones totally changes my, you know, if I want to opt out of being super engaged with well, the world and the people that I'm walking by. I think a lot of people use that as a way to create structures where you don't have a car, where you don't have a building around you. Yeah,
there's a way of recording. There are headphones that are microphones where you wear them and it records perfectly in stereo the distance between your ears. So when somebody else listens on headphones, it sounds like really realistic what is where.
Oh yes, yes, I know what you're talking about.
But I couldn't, so I have some headphones that record that way, and I don't know why I couldn't get behind it after a while because everyone thinks you're listening to headphones. So they don't know that you're recording, and so you're like incognito in a way. And for some reason, I would rather carry my big fuzzy microphone.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I am recording. Here's a big object that I'm recording with.
Right.
And therefore I kind of quest in a way that's more formal, and I don't feel like there's anything, I don't know, not that it's dishonest to record with the headphones, but I felt like it was too isolating. So I don't know. It's interesting though. It sounds really good, and I would like to play with it some more. But
yeah. No, I love.
Oh no.
So fame.
I think we